The bullet struck center mass at 1,847 meters, and in the silence that followed, Commander Nathan Cross stopped walking, turned slowly toward the blonde woman still behind the rifle, and said 3 words that would echo across the entire sniper range. "Who are you?" 12 hours earlier, none of them knew her name. The Marine Corps Scout Sniper School sat deep in the California desert, a stretch of sun-bleached ranges and Quonset huts where the best shooters in the military came to prove they belonged. The heat was constant, oppressive, the kind that warped sight lines and punished mistakes. And on this particular morning, as 43 Marines assembled for Advanced Long-Range Qualification, every eye was forward, every posture locked, because Commander Nathan Cross had just arrived to observe. Cross wasn't just any officer. He held the Marine Corps record for confirmed kills at distance. His reputation moved through units like legend, cold, precise, unforgiving. When he evaluated shooters, careers were made, were ended. And today he was here to watch them all. The range officer called positions, and the Marines moved to their lanes with practiced efficiency, settling behind Barrett M82s and Macmillan TC50s, checking wind flags, adjusting for the brutal thermals rising off the sand. This was the culmination of weeks of training, the shot that separated qualified from elite. At lane 7, near the far edge of the line, a young woman in her late 20s settled into position behind her rifle. Blonde hair pulled back tight, 10 utilities clean but worn at the knees, no unit patches visible. She moved with an economy of motion that suggested comfort, not nerves, her hands adjusting the scope with the kind of quiet precision that doesn't draw attention. Most of the Marines didn't even notice her. The ones who did assumed she was support staff, maybe an armorer, possibly a civilian contractor there to observe. Because women at Advanced Sniper Qual weren't common, and women who looked that young and carried themselves that calmly were even rarer. One Marine 2 lanes over, a broad-shouldered staff sergeant named Vega, glanced her way and smirked. "Wrong range, sweetheart," he muttered, just loud enough for the others to hear. A few chuckles followed, low and careless. The woman didn't respond, didn't even look up, just kept working, checking her dope card, adjusting her rear bag, settling in. Cross stood 30 yards back, arms folded, watching through dark sunglasses as the line prepared. His gaze moved methodically from shooter to shooter, reading posture, breathing, focus. When his eyes passed over lane 7, they paused for just a fraction of a second, then moved on. The range officer's voice cut through the heat. "Shooters, you have one route. Target distance, 1,800 meters. Wind is variable, 5 to 8 knots, shifting east-northeast. You will fire on my command. 1,800 meters. Over a mile. In desert thermals. With shifting wind." It was a shot most Marines would never take in the field, and the ones here knew that half of them wouldn't make it. Bolts locked. Breathing slowed. The desert seemed to hold itself still. "On my mark," the range officer said. 3, 2, 1, fire. The line erupted. 43 rifles cracked almost simultaneously, the sound rolling across the range in a wave. Dust kicked up. Spotters leaned into scopes. And downrange, at targets barely visible through the heat shimmer, impacts began registering. Misses. Close calls. A few solid hits. Vega's round struck low and left. Another Marine's shot went wide by 2 feet. Respectable attempts, but nothing exceptional. At lane 7, the blonde woman's rifle settled after recoil. She didn't move, didn't adjust, just exhaled once and waited. Her spotter, a wiry corporal who hadn't said a word to her all morning, leaned into his scope, tracking the round's path. His expression shifted. Then he blinked, checked again, and his voice came out quieter than intended. "Center mass. Dead center." The range officer heard it. He turned, lifting his own binoculars toward lane 7's target. His face went still. "Confirmed that," he said. The spotter didn't hesitate. "Confirmed. Lane 7. Perfect center mass at 1,847 meters." A ripple moved through the line. Shooters glanced over. Vega straightened, frowning. Commander Cross took 3 steps forward, his attention locking onto lane 7. He didn't say anything yet, just watched. The range officer walked down the line slowly, stopping at lane 7. He looked at the target through his spotting scope one more time, then turned to the woman. "Name," he said. She rose smoothly from behind the rifle, standing at a relaxed parade rest. Her voice was calm, level, carrying no tension. "Carter, sir." Unit. A pause. Not hesitation. Just consideration. MARSOC. 2nd Raider Battalion. The words landed like a physical thing. MARSOC, Marine Special Operations Command. Raiders. Not support. Not civilian. Operator. Vega's smirk disappeared. The range officer nodded slowly, his respect immediate and absolute. Outstanding shot, Sergeant. Staff Sergeant, she corrected quietly. And that's when Commander Cross started walking toward her, his expression unreadable, his stride deliberate and steady, closing the distance between them as every Marine on the line turned to watch. Commander Cross stopped 3 feet from her, close enough that most Marines would feel the weight of it. Staff Sergeant Ava Carter didn't move, didn't adjust her posture, just stood there, calm and grounded, meeting his gaze without flinching. "That's a hell of a shot," Cross said. His voice was even, controlled, but there was something beneath it, not hostility, but scrutiny. "Testing." "Thank you, sir," Carter replied. "You've done this before." It wasn't a question. Carter gave a small nod. "Yes, sir." Cross studied her for another moment, then turned slightly toward the range officer. "Pull her file." "Sir," the range officer said, already moving. Around them, the other Marines had gone silent. Vega stood frozen at his lane, staring. A few others whispered, but most just watched, sensing that something significant was happening and not wanting to miss it. Cross stepped back, giving Carter space but not breaking his focus. "How long have you been with MARSA?" "For years, sir." "Deployments?" 3. 2 in Afghanistan, 1 classified. Cross's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted slightly. Respect, maybe, or recognition. "You qualified here before?" "No, sir. This is my first time at the school." That made him pause. "First time?" "Yes, sir." He glanced back at the target, still visible through the heat shimmer. The single hole punched clean through the center. Then back to her. "And you just put a round dead center at 1,800 meters on your first attempt?" "Yes, sir." A long silence followed. Then Cross did something no one expected. He gestured toward the rifle. "You bring your own?" "No, sir." "Range issued, M82. "Stock setup?" "Yes, sir. I zeroed it this morning." Cross exhaled slowly, a sound that might have been a laugh if he were a different kind of man. Instead, it came out as something closer to disbelief. "You zeroed a Barrett you'd never shot before and put a cold bore hit at 1,800. Carter didn't respond. The statement didn't need confirmation. The range officer returned, tablet in hand, his expression carefully neutral, but his eyes slightly wider than before. He handed it to Cross without a word. Cross read. His jaw tightened slightly. Then he scrolled. "Read more." And when he finally looked up, his entire demeanor had changed. 37 confirmed kills, he said quietly. Longest at 2,100 meters. A wave of shock rolled through the Marines within earshot. Vega looked like he'd been hit. Cross kept reading. Silver Star. Bronze Star with Valor. Navy Cross. Carter said nothing. Just stood there, letting the facts speak. Cross handed the tablet back, then turned fully toward her, his voice dropping lower, more personal. "Why didn't you say something?" "Wasn't asked, sir." "You let them assume." "I let them see what they wanted to see," Carter said, her tone still respectful but firmer now. "It's not my job to correct assumptions." Cross held her gaze for a long moment. Then, slowly, deliberately, he nodded. "Fair enough." He turned toward the rest of the line, raising his voice so everyone could hear. "Listen up. What you just witnessed is what separates competent from exceptional. Staff Sergeant Carter didn't just make that shot. She made it look easy. And the reason half of you missed is because you were thinking about the shot instead of taking it." He gestured back toward Carter. "She's been downrange. She's done the work. And she didn't need to announce it because her performance did it for her." Vegas stared at the ground, his face flushed. Cross stepped closer to the line. "This is what elite looks like. It doesn't brag. It doesn't posture. It just executes." Then he looked back at Carter one more time. "You've got one more shot today. Target's at 2,100 meters. Same conditions. You up for it?" Carter's expression didn't change. "Yes, sir." Cross almost smiled. "Almost. Then let's see it." The range officer moved quickly, resetting the lane, adjusting the target distance. The other Marines watched in complete silence. Now, no jokes, no whispers, just focus. Carter returned to her rifle, settling back into position with that same quiet efficiency. She adjusted her scope, checked the wind flags, calculated thermals and Coriolis effect without hesitation. Her breathing slowed. Her body stilled. 2,100 meters. Over 1.3 miles. A shot most snipers would never attempt outside of control conditions. Cross stood directly behind her now, watching through his own spotting scope, his attention absolute. The range officer raised his hand. On your call, Staff Sergeant. Carter's finger rested lightly on the trigger. She exhaled once, twice, and on the third breath, she fired. The recoil absorbed. The sound echoed. And for 3 full seconds, no one moved. Then the spotter's voice came through, clear and certain. Hit. Center mass. Cross lowered his scope slowly. He stared at the target for a long moment, then turned back toward Carter, who was already clearing her rifle, her movements calm and practiced. And this time, Commander Nathan Cross did something he almost never did. He stepped forward, extended his hand, and when she stood to take it, he said 4 words that would follow her for the rest of her career. You just broke my record. The handshake lasted only a moment, but it carried the weight of something far larger. Commander Cross released her hand and stepped back, his expression no longer evaluating, no longer testing. Just respect. Pure and absolute. That's 2 for 2 at extreme range, he said. Under observation. Under pressure. He glanced briefly at the other Marines, then back to her. Most operators don't perform like that in training. You just did it twice. Carter gave a small nod. Thank you, sir. Cross turned toward the range officer. I want her scores documented and submitted to Quantico. This goes on record. Yes, sir. The range officer replied immediately. Around them, the silence had shifted. It wasn't shock anymore. It was something closer to awe. Vega stood at his lane, staring at Carter with an expression that had gone from dismissive to humbled. A few other Marines exchanged glances, their earlier assumptions collapsing under the weight of what they'd just witnessed. Cross addressed the line again, his voice carrying across the range. What happened here today is a lesson you won't get from a manual. Staff Sergeant Carter didn't show up trying to prove anything. She didn't need to, because when you're that good, the work speaks for itself. He paused, letting the words settle. Some of you made assumptions today about who belonged here, about what a sniper looks like, and every one of those assumptions just got shattered by 2 perfect shots. A few Marines shifted uncomfortably. Vega's jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. Cross continued. Remember this. The most dangerous operator in the field isn't the loudest one. It's the one you underestimate. The one who stays calm while everyone else is trying to prove something. That's who survives. That's who wins. He turned back to Carter. You've got nothing left to prove here. You're cleared for certification. Highest marks I've ever signed off on. Appreciate that, sir, Carter said. Cross hesitated, then added. You planning on staying with Marsoc? That's the plan, sir. Good. Because if you ever want to move into advanced instruction, you let me know. We need people like you teaching the next generation. Carter considered that for a moment, then gave a slight nod. I'll keep that in mind. Cross stepped back, signaling the conversation was over, but his respect lingered in the air between them. He turned toward the range officer. Carry on. As Cross walked back toward the observation area, the tension on the line finally broke. A few Marines exhaled. Others began packing up their gear, quieter now, more thoughtful. Vega approached slowly, stopping a few feet from Carter's lane. He didn't say anything at first, just stood there, wrestling with something internal. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and stripped of its earlier arrogance. I was out of line earlier, he said. I was wrong. Carter glanced at him, her expression neutral. You made an assumption, she said simply. Most people do. Doesn't make it right. No, she agreed. But it makes you human. Vega nodded slowly, then extended his hand. Respect, Staff Sergeant. Carter shook it once, firm and brief. Earned respect, she said. Not given. He nodded again, something shifting in his posture. Humility, maybe, or understanding. Then he stepped back, returning to his lane without another word. As the range began to clear, the other Marines filtered past Carter's station. A few offered quiet nods. One whispered, Hell of a shot, Staff Sergeant. Another just met her eyes and gave a small, respectful incline of his head. Carter packed her gear methodically, the same way she'd set it up, efficiently, without hurry. The rifle went back into its case. The dope card folded neatly into her pocket. The rest secured with practiced precision. When she finished, She stood alone for a moment, looking out across the desert range toward the targets barely visible in the distance. 2 perfect hits. 2 records. But none of it felt like victory to her. It just felt like work. Behind her, the range officer approached, holding a sealed envelope. "Your certification," he said. "Signed by Commander Cross himself." "You're official." Carter took it, glancing at the seal before tucking it into her cargo pocket. "Thank you." The range officer hesitated, then added, "For what it's worth, that was the best shooting I've seen in 15 years at this range. And I've seen a lot." Carter gave a small, genuine smile. "Appreciate that." As she walked toward the exit, the sun beginning its slow descent toward the horizon, she passed a group of younger Marines just arriving for evening drills. They glanced at her, saw the plain utilities, the lack of visible rank, and looked right past her. She didn't mind, because that's how it always worked. People saw what they expected. And when it mattered, when the shot had to be made and the stakes were real, she didn't need them to see her coming. She just needed to hit the target. And she always did. Weeks later, back at her unit, Carter stood in a briefing room as her commander handed her new orders. Another deployment, another mission, another chance to do what she did best. "They're asking for you specifically," the commander said. "By name." Carter nodded once. "When do we leave?" 48 hours. "I'll be ready." As she walked out into the afternoon sun, her gear already staged, her mind already shifting into mission mode, she thought briefly about the range, about the Marines who had underestimated her, about Commander Cross and the respect in his handshake. But mostly, she thought about the work ahead, because that's all that ever really mattered. Not the assumptions, not the recognition, just the shot. And she never missed.